Before we begin today's episode, I want to share a quick note with you. In this episode, I talk openly about parts of my life that include trauma, abuse, loss, and mental health struggles. While these experiences are an important part of my journey in healing, I recognize that some of these topics may feel difficult or triggering for some listeners. Please take care of yourself as you listen. This is vital. If at any point you need to pause, skip ahead, or come back to this episode another time, please listen to yourself. My intention in sharing these experiences is not to cause pain, but to speak honestly about the reality of a spiritual journey and to remind you that healing and transformation are possible. Thank you for giving me the space to share this honestly. My hope in telling you this story is that if ever you felt different, misunderstood, or unsure of your place in the world, you might hear parts of your own journey in mine. And with that, let me share how this all began. Spiritual journey can sometimes be portrayed on social media as something mystical, beautiful, calming, and easy. But the truth? Tuning into spirit is nothing like that. It's more like a drama movie filled with heartache, celebration, tears, moments where you definitely want to turn back, and moments where everything shifts and you finally feel peace, freedom, and choice. Welcome to And She Remembers, the podcast where women reconnect with their intuition, reclaim their power, and remember who they truly are. Today, I'm going to share the raw, honest truth of my own personal journey to becoming an oracle as it stands today. I'm in my mid 40s now, and although this journey is still unfolding with ups and downs, I wouldn't change it. I was born into a world of a controlling cult, religious trauma, and violence of all kinds. Very early on, I learned that conforming meant safety. But even in that environment, I knew something more existed. I remember laying in bed when I was young and knowing within my soul that fairies were real. Honestly, I used to let my mind wander and imagine I was a fairy princess that had been stolen from her realm, where my real parents couldn't do anything but watch as I suffered through this human life. But their love, I could feel it so deeply that it always brought me comfort. I still remember clearly the images of them showing up. For most of my life, I never told anyone this story. I always figured it was childish, maybe just a coping mechanism or wishful thinking. But now I understand something different. Now I believe that was my connection to the fairy realm reaching out to me, a reminder that there was more magic in this world than what I could see with my eyes. And maybe, just maybe, they were trying to give a little girl hope that goodness still existed somewhere. My connection to divine beings was something I was born with, but I would never admit, not in a million years as I was growing up. I didn't want my beliefs to get me into trouble, be viewed as weird or different. What child does? I told my dad one day that I saw my dead great grandpa, who I loved dearly, and that he was really with us and he was trying to talk to me. Growing up in a house of violence, control, and torture, this confession of truth did not bode well for me. I learned in that moment to never tell anyone that truth of what I was seeing. After telling my dad about seeing my great grandpa, I learned something very quickly. Truth was not safe. And in that moment, I didn't just silence my voice, I actually began to question my reality. I remember being in my teens the first time I heard the term schizophrenic. I figured for sure I had this terrible mental illness. I say terrible as that was the way it was talked about. I knew things about people I shouldn't have known. I saw people that no one else acknowledged, and I struggled if I was in a space with lots of emotions. I thought I was doomed to live a life of constant fear, stress, and panic. would never tell anyone. At the time, I thought I was broken. Now I understand I wasn't broken. I was overwhelmed in a world that didn't understand sensitivity. I did try to tell my mom once about something that used to happen to me at school. There were moments when I would be talking, answering a teacher's question, or just sitting at my desk, and suddenly I would phase out of reality. At least that's the only way I know how to describe it. I didn't understand what was happening. I honestly thought there might be something medically wrong with me. When it would happen, it felt like my awareness would shift somewhere else. I could still hear things, but there was also this loud voice or presence in my mind that I couldn't explain. One time it happened in my class. My teacher actually stopped and asked if I was okay. It took me a moment to come back to the room. I remember feeling this wave of embarrassment wash over me as I quietly said, sorry, and put my head down, hoping no one would ask me any more questions. How could I explain something I didn't even understand myself? My mom ended up coming to the school to talk to the teacher about it, but when she asked me which teacher it was, I panicked and I told her I had lied, that it wasn't a big deal and we should just ignore it. She wasn't impressed I had lied, but the truth was, I was lying about lying. Being raised in a strict religious cult, I didn't know how to explain to someone what I was experiencing, which was something beyond words. And to this day, this is the first time I've ever admitted that out loud. Looking back now, I can see that those moments weren't just me phasing out the way I thought they were. They were moments where my awareness was expanding in ways I didn't yet understand. But at the time, all I felt was confusion, shame, and fear that something was deeply wrong with me. So instead of exploring it, I learned to hide it. I was always told I was too sensitive, that my outbursts were uncalled for, and I had to force myself into a shell that everyone else was comfortable with. The thing is, when someone would say something really unpleasant to me, there were times I didn't react, as I knew they were kidding around. Yet there were other times where it physically hurt my heart, as I knew without a doubt they were not joking, but saying they were as a cover. How do you explain that to an adult that doesn't believe in knowing? I figured I was being too sensitive, as other people would joke around and didn't show hurt, pain, or distress. By the time I was in junior high, I was stealing liquor out of my parents' cabinet just to survive with numbness while I had to go to school. Not every day, but on days where I was extra anxious. No one knew. No one. I was smart. I always chose vodka over anything else as I knew there was no smell. However, this was one of the stupidest moves I could do, as liquor actually made things worse for me. This is one of the reasons I actually don't drink now. When I do, my frequency would get all muddled, and what I could feel in that school was even worse. It was hard to sit still some days. I just wanted to run or get away as fast as I could. I suffered for years and years without telling anyone what was going on. As the words, you're too sensitive, this is life, don't make anyone else uncomfortable, kept me locked in a prison of embarrassment, shame, and fear. I always knew I was different, but from the environment I grew up in, I thought it was a simple fix of changing my attitude. I did everything I could to change, but I always seemed to mess it up, and usually in a really big way. When I moved out on my own, I partied hardy. I worked at a restaurant, and at the time, there was such a thing as called industry night. That meant show your pay stub, get into the bar for free, and get crazy drink specials. I started to drink, drink, and drink, looking for favor from any man I could to make me feel loved, special, and to help me forget this deep, dark hole I had in my heart. Maybe love would stop the anxiety and panic I was feeling. Of course, however, because I didn't care for myself really, I attracted all sorts of creeps, guys that didn't respect me, and I also ended up being raped by two men I thought were my friends. This was when I started to realize that drinking was not the answer. It just led to more pain and heartache. At the time, I thought I was coping. Looking back, I was trying to escape myself. When I was 21, I moved to Edmonton, Alberta, and I met my now husband. He was the second person I ever talked about being able to see the dead. We were walking at about 2 a.m. down our street, and I saw a young man I knew was dead. I stopped and Colin asked what was wrong. I asked him if he ever saw someone out of the corner of his eye, as I just saw a young man flash in front of us. He told me it was no big deal and that everyone sort of has that thing happen to them. I replied, no, not like this. I can tell you how old he is, that his hair color is brown, that he had a mushroom cut, that he died on this corner, and that he is wearing a red and white Letterman jacket, how tall he is, and so much more. I thought for sure I was going to lose this amazing man, but he just said, it's not that I don't believe, but I don't believe either. For the first time, I said something out loud and I wasn't rejected. That mattered more than I realized at the time. About 10 years after that moment, things really started to shift for me. Colin and I moved to an acreage, and I really started to see, feel, and sense things on this property. It was a lovely home and land, but I always felt like something was watching us or someone. We had many odd experiences in this place, and honestly, we weren't the only ones. Friends and family would sometimes mention that they felt odd in our house and as if someone was hanging around in our guest room. At the time, I still didn't feel comfortable with anything spiritual. I labeled all of this as I had been taught demons. I wouldn't even let Colin bring home any scary movies, books, or anything that remotely smelt like demons, horror, or witchcraft. I wouldn't even let him have his own Stephen King books in the house. Looking back now, I realize this house wasn't just a place we lived. It was the place where my gifts started becoming louder and where the life I had spent years trying to avoid finally began knocking on the door. The more we lived in that house, though, I just knew I had a door within me that needed opening. I would tell Colin that I was afraid of this door because I didn't know what was on the other side of it. I was scared it might be memories from my past or something else I couldn't explain. So I did everything I could to keep that door closed. When I hit 30, it felt like my soul had cracked open. I knew deep down that I could not continue the way I was living. Everything about my life suddenly felt wrong, not just uncomfortable, wrong. In fact, I wasn't even sure I wanted to stay married to Colin, and that thought terrified me. Instead of waiting for him to leave me and cause the hurt, I figured I would cause the hurt first. At least that way I had the illusion of control. Looking back now, I can see that what I thought was control was actually fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being rejected, fear that if anyone truly understood what was happening inside of me, they would walk away. It was a heartbreaking time for both of us, but now I understand something I couldn't see back then. That moment when everything felt like it was falling apart was actually the moment the universe was knocking on the door I had spent my entire life trying to keep shut. And whether I liked it or not, that door was beginning to open. At the time, I thought my life was falling apart. Now I see this was the moment everything began to come together. During my split from Colin, I found myself living with a wonderful gal named Jenny. She rented me a room, and I tried to figure out what was going on in my life, why I was feeling things that no one else did, and seeing imaginary people. I ended up telling Jenny about a ghost that was living in her house one day. But for sure, she was going to kick me out or tell me I was nuts. However, Jenny simply chuckled and said, "I'm not surprised, and I totally believe in that. I have a girlfriend that helps people cross over." I didn't even know how I kept standing, as you could have pushed me over with a feather. Someone didn't think I was crazy, look at me like I was sick, or tell me I was weird. To Jenny, it was just another moment in the day. Someone didn't think I was crazy, didn't look at me like I was broken, or try to fix me. And in that moment, something inside me softened for the first time. That was the moment I started to question everything I had been taught about myself. In my mind, I was like, okay, so maybe the cult I grew up in was lying even more about stuff than I realized. I started seeking out more connections to spirit. I ended up with a book called Opening to Channel by Sanya Roman and Dwayne Packer. This book, although I never honestly finished it, was a game changer. It was how I met my first guide named Daniel. I actually thought his name was David at first, but when I went to a guide reader, she chuckled. She chuckled as we went to her private space and told me, "Your guide's name is not David, it's Daniel." Again, I stopped in my tracks and was like, "Holy shit." See, this is before social media was a thing. And being afraid of what other people might think, I didn't tell anyone about connecting to a guide named David. My appetite for understanding spirit became unstoppable. Not because it was trendy, but because I finally felt like I was finding truth. Colin took me to my very first expo on this very way of life called Soul, Spirit, and Body. I had a reading from a lovely lady, and she told me, "You can do what I'm doing. Why are you asking me to read for you?" Again, another life changing moment. I still feel the surprise, the doubt, and the "are you crazy?" feeling in my chest when she told me I would be doing readings for clients one day. But I knew what I was doing wasn't working for me anymore. So I had to be open to the new, the unexplainable. I decided I didn't want to learn on my own. I wanted someone to guide and teach me. That was a challenge, as at the time, it was almost as if those that were working as light workers didn't want to share any knowledge. I emailed countless women who called themselves psychic, medium, or anything to do with energy, and I didn't receive a single reply, not even an answer as where to start. I felt alone and lost again. Then I found the perfect teacher, Harmel Joy Baird, a local celebrity here in Edmonton, Alberta. I was fortunate to connect with her while she was still teaching classes in her basement. My first psychic development class left my mind blown. See, I was still back and forth as to if I really believed in all this. I know, but religious indoctrination runs deep. When I left that class to go home, I called Colin and was in tears when I told him I am not crazy. I know what is going on with me. I'm just really sensitive to energy. Psychics are real, Colin. It's real. The rush of "this is it" was massive. I drove home with tears streaming down my face as I knew this was the door that was within me. The universe had swung it wide open and said, "It is time to step through if you're ready." I was. I remember driving home crying, not because I was overwhelmed, but because for the first time in my life, I thought, I'm not crazy. That moment didn't change my beliefs. It changed my identity. Colin told me later that he still didn't know what to believe in at the time. He thought it would be a passing phase, but if it gave me peace, comfort, and strength, who was he to tell me no? When I started this journey, Colin and I didn't tell anyone. I was too scared. I didn't want to be viewed as a con artist, demonized, or just off my rocker. Eventually, I did tell my family that not only did I connect to energy, but I was also able to talk to the dead. Overall, I can say my family was taken aback, but they decided to support me, even if they didn't believe me. Over time, however, the shifts in me were noticed by everyone. I was calmer, I was able to relax, enjoy myself, and not be on edge. My family were even shocked to hear of some of the validating mediumship readings I did, with bang on points that no one could Google or research. While I was still learning, my husband asked me if I would consider being a light worker full time. Of course not. Are you kidding? an amazingly good paying job. I have an incredible pension, benefits, and a really good boss. I asked why would he even ask if I would leave? He replied, I never see you as happy, satisfied, or proud as when you are giving readings. Well, shortly after that, I decided to ask the universe if I should stop working in the professional world and do my own thing. I asked for a ladybug as the sign that I needed to move on into doing my own business and serve the universe. I got that sign, believe it or not, in a Dollarama store in the form of a stuffy ladybug. It had 10 black spots on it, just as I had asked for. I was so stunned, I literally threw the toy back into the box when I counted the 10th spot. I slowly walked back to Colin and tried to tell him, but I didn't even have the words. When I finally did get the words out, he hugged me and said, I'm so glad you are going to follow your calling. Safe to say, he believed in spirit and the universe by now. How could he not? The changes he saw in me, the little bits and pieces I shared with him about readings, it was mind blowing. He even started to get curious and wanted to know more on a personal level. That ladybug was not just a sign, it was a confirmation. And from that moment on, there was no going back. When I tell you that I dedicated my life to spirit and reminding women how amazing and powerful their own intuition is, it doesn't mean that I followed spirit blindly. I'm not a slave, not at all. I still have free will. I have told the universe a few times no. And here are some examples of me doing just that. Remember, we talked about my first guide, Daniel? He was such a special guide, and I adored him. However, at a certain point in my journey, he came to me and said, Sarah, I have shared your journey with you as much as I was supposed to. It's time for me to leave and help others to open to spirit and their own beautiful gifts. I got really mad and upset. And I said, absolutely not. I would like you to stay with me. Please, I'm not ready to say goodbye. He looked at me with fondness in his eyes and said, okay, I will wait. However, about 3 months later, I experienced so much gratitude for my work. I said, thank you, Daniel, for sharing so much of my beautiful journey with me. You mean a lot to me. I'm so grateful to you. He replied, Sarah, as much as I love watching you, your journey, and your growth, I'd like to share that with another. You appreciated my work. Don't you think it's time to let me move forward? For someone else to experience the same thing as you did? Oh, man. I knew it was my ego keeping me in a known, so called safe space. So, as hard as it was, and as much as I cried, I agreed. I knew it wasn't fair to keep Daniel from someone else that needed his love, support, insights, and energy. I thanked him profusely and said goodbye. But you know what? I wasn't left alone. That is when I met Ezekiel, Hannah, and Feather. Ezekiel is very much like Daniel. He is a guard, a reminder of truth, and he's very stoic. He is my protector. Hannah reminds me of the ants from from the movie Practical Magic when they are working in the garden. You know, when they have the sun hats and the cover over their faces? I've never seen Hannah's face, but I always see her long, thick blonde braid hanging over her shoulder. She comes to me when I would do gardening work, be out in nature, or just needed a dose of feminine energy. Feather, he's kind of interesting. He looks like a cross between a flamingo and Big Bird, but is purple. He originally actually had a different name, but I asked if I could call him Feather, and he said, of course. He comes to me when I needed to be reminded of the lighter side of life or when I need a laugh. He is very wonderful. But see, there's an example of when I said no. I said, no, I need you to stay. And Daniel did. Another time I said no to spirit was actually over 8 years ago. I was asked by a group of beings to channel for them. They actually called themselves the Council. Shared this experience and this calling with a few people, but I often said, I don't know why they chose me, like me of all people. I don't even know if I believe in channeling for a group of entities. People are going to think that I'm just elevating myself to grandiose heights. I continually said no until one day they were gone. I'm surprised, but this is the way the universe works. You can be tasked with doing something, and if you use your free will to say no, they will move on to the next person who will eventually answer the call. The next time I was asked to channel, I said, of course, yes. The oracles are such lovely, deeply feminine beings that they like, they're just so incredible. They're called the oracles of divine feminine energy, but I just call them oracles for short. And they match my energy, my fire, my passion for awakening of other women around the world. And honestly, when they met up with me, they were like, no choice, Sarah. This is in your life path and your life plan. You agreed to do this, so let's get it done. I welcomed them with open arms, and they have given some amazing messages over the years. I truly do love working with them. Now, going on 11 years since I started this full time journey, I am still working for myself, yet to connect to spirit and the universe, share my connections with my clients around the world. What a privilege. Honestly, being able to channel divine messages, life changing, reaffirming, validating messages, nothing else I would rather do. Have other things changed in my life? Well, I've had many labels: spiritual medium, psychic medium, medium, light worker, coach. But as I mentioned in a previous podcast, the universe has told me oracle. That is what and who I am. See, I don't just share intuitive insights with my clients or mediumship readings. I get to connect to the universe on an entirely new level. As well as I mentioned, channeling messages from the oracles directly to my clients, even during Facebook Live readings. Now, a few things I want to share with you is the fact that although my story sounds challenging in some ways, in no way does it share with you just how up and down this all has been. Because when you want to serve others, when you want to support other women on their own empowering journeys, you have to deal with your own stuff first. You never want to share guidance with someone when you haven't faced your own shadows. You need empathy. You need human understanding. You need to face your own fears, your own wounds, your own ego. You need to relate on a human level. At times, I felt not only was my entire world shattering, but the emotions that were moving through me made me feel like I was going to be split in two. There were multiple times I wanted to give up, wanted to throw in the towel and go back to the corporate world, hide my head in the sand. But I also know that going back was not an option. See, I have so much more peace in myself, my life, and my energy that going back to the way I used to live, although my ego tries to convince me it would be better, it really would make things so much worse. I do live so much better now. I have a broader viewpoint. I don't live taking many things personally, understand people better than I ever have before, and so much more. The best gift, though, that I have from the universe is the fact I know, even in the most isolated feeling moments, that I am not, nor have I ever been alone. My life has also changed in many empowering and freeing ways. But I want to share with you all sides of my spiritual journey. Sacrifices have been made so I can continue to deepen my connection to the universe and your loved ones. This means as much as I used to love going to hockey and football games as well as concerts, I'm not able to anymore. There's just too much energy. Even movie theaters at times are a challenge, but I still live an amazing life. Find other things to do that I love and know that what I have given up is 100% worth it. The messages, the validations that I have been able to share is worth everything I no longer do. I definitely have made mistakes on this journey as well. Some readings I have done, I cringe and wish I had given refunds. They weren't really that great. giving answers to personal questions that had nothing to do with the person sitting in front of me, ignoring messages for fear of being wrong that could have been seriously impactful. Just because I am connected to guides, loved ones in the universe, and work from a place of love doesn't mean I get it right all of the time. My ego definitely has been a part of me that I am still learning to navigate. At times, I feel world events deeper and stronger than most, even if I have no clue what is actually taking place. There are days where I am simply exhausted and haven't done anything, when I'm crying from a surge of emotions that are being felt that I know don't belong to me, and sometimes so angry I want to scream. But one of the most amazing things about my connection to spirit is the fact I get to step back, take stock of what and how I am feeling, and know I have a choice. I now know I actually have the knowledge and understanding that I can either stay with how I'm feeling or grab my tools of knowledge and ask if I'm going to stay where I am or if I would like to move to a higher frequency. Because I have the tools at my disposal, I'm able to do so quicker and with more confidence. The answer is not always moving to a more positive vibe. Sometimes I have to sit with the massive amounts of trauma from my past. I have been navigating CPTSD, ADHD, perimenopause, and life in general. I'm a suicide survivor. I have been beaten, sold for sex, tortured, lost 6 babies, and so much more. But I am here. I am not an alcoholic, never been into drugs, and do my best to walk every day with a love, happiness, and joy that makes my life worth living. I know without a doubt that if I didn't embrace my gifts of connecting to spirit, if I was still alive, I would not be living the way I am now. There have been many times in my life where I have almost thrown in the towel of being a light worker. To be super honest, I did that almost 2 years ago when we had to leave Portugal and come back to Canada. I felt like a complete failure. We moved and traveled based on the belief that my business would be self sustaining. I believed and still believe in manifesting, but I could not for the life of me get above a ceiling amount of money being made by my work. Some weeks were spent frantically trying to make things work because booking a flight to Canada to me felt like a humiliation. Proof that Colin and I were just dreamers who couldn't live a life outside of the normal path that everyone else around us followed. The first week we were back, I spiraled out completely. I was determined to get another corporate job, make money, and just completely give up on being of service to others. It was too hard, it was too uncertain, and I was done. I even dyed my hair back to brown because it felt like the only thing I could control. But the second I looked in the mirror and saw myself, I felt even more shattered and broken. The woman looking back at me didn't feel like me at all. And I remember wanting to scream out loud, "What the hell is happening? Who is that looking back at me? What have I done?" The following 2 years were spent dealing with my CPTSD in ways that were completely consuming. Even meditating sent me into spirals of memories, heartbreak, and emotions that I didn't want to touch. They hurt, they burned, they were heavy in a way that was almost unbearable. I had zero passion for my work. I truly thought spirit and the universe had just turned their backs on me. And that belief that spirit had abandoned me was one of the hardest things I ever had to face because it forced me to ask a question I had never asked before. Was my connection to spirit only real when my life was going well? Or was it real even in the moments where everything felt like it was falling apart? Some of my days were so low and so painful that I truly wondered if I could keep going. The shame was overwhelming. The beliefs I had built my life on felt shattered. But slowly, with time, commitment, and a willingness to heal, things began to shift. And quite frankly, I know without a doubt that if I had not spent years building a relationship with spirit, learning to question my beliefs, and trusting that life unfolds for a reason, I may not have survived that period of my life. It was that connection, even when it felt fragile, that helped carry me through. And to be honest, looking back, I understand why I couldn't break through that financial ceiling and why we had to come back to Canada. My husband wasn't able to work in Europe for visa reasons. And so we needed to come back so I could heal. So the universe knew. It knew it needed to get me back to Canada into a safe place where I could take care of me. I want to recognize the fact that I could not have done all of that without my husband. He told me continually to take the time to heal and to do the work, to keep leaning on spirit. He was also my human form anchor about spirit. He would remind me of truths that this painful journey was simply allowing me to release the pain of the past to make way for future joys and to really allow myself to understand me on deeper levels. 2024 and 25 were some of the hardest years I have ever experienced, but I am grateful for them. I am only now just getting back into working full time, and I can say that I know that what I am doing is what I am meant to do. Inspire women to know that they are not what has happened to them. They get to choose how to live their own lives, and the opinions of others truly don't matter. When you hear experts talking about shadow work and how vital it is, please do not ignore it. Spiritual beings, yes, we are, and yes, they are light, but you'd never know about light if there was no dark. Shadow work can be challenging, maybe gut wrenching, and sometimes you end up wondering why the hell you went down this path. But in the end, when you come to the other side and feel the frequency and vibration of connection and love again, you know it was well worth it. Shadow work isn't pretty. It's not easy. It doesn't always feel spiritual, but it is necessary because you cannot hold light without being willing to face the dark. My connections over time have changed so much that as easily as I breathe, I connect. I'm not afraid of Wicca anymore. I'm actually embracing the knowledge to be able to better serve the world. I connect to different spiritual beings. My intuition is no longer really in my own voice. It is a connection and vibration that I recognize as the universe, source, and spirit. I know when I have shifted into my ego so much faster than ever, and I feel love more deeply than I ever expected. And the life I live is not dictated by life, but I decide. I have lived around the world and have my eyes set on even more amazing places. What I want you to understand with what I have shared with you is just because you start remembering your connection to your intuition, it does not mean you are going to be sheltered from growth, heartbreak, fear, or pain. All of those things are connected to your life lesson plan and your ego. Life experiences will deepen your personal connection to the universe and your intuition if you let them. You will never be controlled by your intuition. You will never lose the freedom of choice. But if you let it guide you, your life definitely comes with more freedom, more opportunities, more blessings, more understanding how life is yours to create, and so, so much more joy. I live a life that most dream about and one that I am so grateful to have. Others will not understand your choices, your beliefs, or your truths. And yet, even more will see the growth, the shifts, the peace within you, and ask you, what is your secret? You will simply tell them you tuned out the constant noise of other people's opinions, beliefs, emotions, and or actions and started to listen to what your intuitive heart was sharing with you. You are doing what you want without needing outside approval. Trust me, this will happen as you will become freer, more confident, and happier. How do I know that? This is exactly what happened to me. I still have my moments of doubt, fear, and shame, but they do not control me, anchor me, or keep me sentenced to a lifetime of low vibes. Now, it might be an hour or two, sometimes a day at most, but very rarely now. So, after everything I've shared with you today, the highs, the heartbreak, the doubt, the awakening, here's what I want you to remember. You are not broken. You are remembering. When I look back now, I think about that little girl lying in bed believing that fairies were real. She didn't know it yet, but she was already remembering the magic she would spend the rest of her life helping other women rediscover. Who am I now? I am an oracle that knows without a doubt that my dreams and goals are not just dreams that will stay out of reach. They are 100% a remembering within my soul of what is possible and meant for me. I will follow them when my fear tries to stop me. I will rise even on days when my ego tells me to disconnect and stream movies all day. I will never doubt my connection to spirit and the universe when I cannot even count how many women I have been able to guide, inspire, and support through divine messages of realization and remembering to shift into their own power. I am happy. I am loved. I am the creator of my own life. Now, I love being able to get guidance, advice, and more holy shit, that's amazing moments than I can count. Creating a life you love isn't always going to be sunshine, roses, and dances. Shifting out of fear is one that takes a constant self aware choice, especially when those around you may not understand. But if you truly, truly believe in your connection and your ability to connect on a deeper and higher level to the divine, to truth, and to your own intuition, you never need to hide in shame, silence, or fear. Rock your truth. Tell all those that are willing to listen, as you will never please everyone. So start with pleasing yourself. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. The world may try to silence your intuition, but your soul will never stop calling you home. Until next time, trust your intuition, listen to your voice, and remember who you truly are.